Welcome to yet another episode of the Working Audio Tools podcast, the home and the place of all things mixing and mastering, as myself, Ed Thorne, and fellow co-host Paul Third document our journeys to becoming full-time mix engineers. When, will, or if it will happen. Who knows? Who knows? Place your bets in the comments below, and we'll find out in an indeterminate amount of time because we've no idea how long it'll take.
Absolutely none. Absolutely
But
none.
we did speak to one of our mentors this week who told us about his former assistants who said, yeah, they basically worked for free for years before anything happened. So I took that on board this week and thought, yeah, I'm quite happy with my life as it is if I don't succeed in the studio yet. I still enjoy mixing and I'm doing all right for money with other things. So what's to complain about?
I know.
Nothing. Anyway, that's a short episode. It's been emotional.
Right, so this week what I thought I'd do is we'd just do a little update on, our mixing journey. So it's great talking about all the tools that we've got and, all the mix comparisons, but we don't really do much in regards to actually sharing what we've been doing. So I just thought it'd be good to have a little update and kind of talk about things that we've changed, things that have maybe got better, things that got worse, and if we've got any solutions for them.
We're usually very secretive, usually give this illusion of genius and grandeur and success when actually we just faff about in the studio on our own.
Yeah, we just make a fuck ton of mistakes, which nobody knows about, and then me and him talk about it, and then go, yeah, we're amazing now, aren't we? Well,
yeah, and other people seem to just know or are absolutely oblivious to. We don't really know.
Yep. So I'll start, right? So something that I think I've gotten better at, and it's taken me, honestly, years to master, and it's always that man there that always helps me out with this and helps me to get better every time, has been drums. I have learned so much to the point where I don't argue as much about drums with Ed because it's taken me years.
I still been the key
I know, we still do a little bit. But what I found is that I've calibrated my brain to where I understand why he, gets drums to sound the way that he does. And I think it was that, look, me and Ed are very stubborn, and I think many people in the audio industry are completely very stubborn.
Don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, sure, yeah. Okay, must just be me then. But I think one thing that I found with drums that's been really important is just, again, the whole less is more approach. Really, when we talked last year about the whole less is more thing, and it genuinely is a big thing. Once you learn that, your mixes will get better. But especially to drums, I have just been doing even more less is more, but focusing more on listening. I think that's what Ed teaches me a lot. My approach is let's get kick shape here, let's get this, let's get my template in, and let's have a muck about and do this and that. Where what I understood with him, especially in the Roses mix, because there was a kind of I call it a recall, but a remix that I did, and the one big feedback note he had for me was the hi-hat. And he was like, Paul, you're missing the groove of the hi-hat. And he tells me this. He's been telling me this for years. And sometimes I get so focused on the kick and the snare. And I'm like, dude, that's all that's important to me is kick, snare,
What was your first response to that message, Paul?
I can't remember. Tell me.
Hearing's fucked. You can't hear the top end. No, Paul, it's not about top end. I can't hear the hi-hats.
But what you did really well for me was that you said it's not a frequency thing. It's just a level thing.
It's a glue thing, isn't it?
Yeah. And see, once I had the hi-hat, because I did have a hi-hat, I just, hi-hat mic, I just didn't have it as loud. And when I brought it in, and I think I just raised the overheads by a dB, I was like, wow, that really does change the song a lot. It adds this top end that wasn't really there, because Ed was like, it's like there's almost a gap in the groove. And then all of a sudden, it just sits perfectly, and then the groove just goes. And then when you think about, a lot of other genres, hi-hats are so important. They're so important. If you think about a lot of the hip-hop stuff, honestly, fucking hi-hats are just as loud as fucking the vocal or the snare. It's
especially drill.
Yeah, so loud. So I think focusing on the groove and teaching myself to listen has been really important. So me and Ed are doing a mix just now. It's a bit of a bollock, we're not going to lie.
Oh my God.
It is a bit of a bollock. But the thing that I've taken from that Roses mix there was focusing on, right, I've ditched the hi-hat mic, but it's only because the hi-hat is so loud in the overheads where I know I don't need it. So I've got the overheads loud, but I've ditched the hi-hat mic because I didn't like it. It was just, I would see if I would have liked the sound of it, I would have kept it. There's something about the hi-hat mic that's just, it's full, but I don't know, it just wasn't really working for me. And I don't know, maybe when we do the mix, he'll go, should have kept the hi-hat.
Controversial things to talk about already. I like it.
Yeah, I know. But I think what the good thing is that it wasn't anything to do with a plug-in or gear. It was when I got in the mix, it was like, right, okay, where's the hi-hat? Where's the groove? Where are the cymbals hitting? Like, am I keeping the groove, and trying to think of the drums as a whole, thing, not just kick, snare. And even with the processing, just having an easier workflow. So genuinely on kick, it's for me just now, it's kick shaper. Well, first off, I'll always do the Melda M-Auto line. I'll always use that. That's the thing I do. So I'll do all the kicks, then the snares, and then on the buses I'll do kick, snare, overheads, the tom bus, and they'll all get aligned. Just the way that I do it. And then it's just like kick shaper, and then a clipper. I've moved to flatline for my clipper now. There was like a license issue that I was using TDR Limiter 6, but for whatever reason I can't get into my account. And then I forgot I had flatline, and I was like, no, flatline's one of the best clippers out there. So I've been using that, and again, just putting things to practice. Like, even like in this mix, hopefully what you'll hear when you do hear it is that in my opinion, I've really controlled the drums really well. And it's amazing to see just how controlling the peaks, just those like a dB of clipping, right? Kick and snare, again on the bass as well. I do it on toms as well. Because I think what people forget about toms is that toms are fucking loud. Like, see, like, I always find that toms have got this like very transient, peaky thing that can go on a lot of times. And especially when you need to have them loud in a mix, they could swamp, when they come in, they can genuinely swamp the headroom very, very quickly. So I find that, a good bit of compression, and then a bit of limiting as well, but not going daft, because obviously if you do too much clipping and then you're over distorting, you can hear the distortion. But yeah, working into the limiter, which I've always done. So I use MasterPlan at the very end. So I'm always going into that, and I'm always trying to get my mix roughly around -11. So I'm always leaving a little bit of headroom for the mastering engineer, but I'm still going into the limiter. I'm the master plan. I'm still going into the clipping. I'm still going into the limiting. I'm still hearing that interaction. But yeah, I find that, again, as Jason Joshua talks about it quite a lot, mastering your drums. And what I've been doing more is focusing way more on drums and bass than I ever have done. Like, I'm not joking. I don't now touch the instruments and the vocals till I've got the bass and the drums like on their own, sounding really good and full. And then what I do is I'm just, working everything else around that. Where before I would like almost work the drums around the instruments, which actually in an industry level, the drums are so important because it's the beat, it's the rhythm, it's the feel, it's the groove. You kind of really do just need to kind of revolve everything else around that foundation. Loads of mixers talk about it, but I'm still doing a stripped back approach. Another thing Ed taught me that's really important is snare. I used to always be, for whatever reason, I used to be a little bit judicious about the amount of compression that I gave a snare. Maybe like 2-3 dB. And recently I've just been going in with an 1176, the Arturia one that I quite like. And know what, just again having like a slowish attack. So again, obviously if you have too fast attack, it'll pop, 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 pop. But you let enough of the transient in, very fast release. And I just find that hitting at the snare, maybe 7-8 dB, it depends on the snare. If it's had compression on the way going in, but even just 7 to 8 dB can really give you this like almost like a little bit of extra sustain on the snare, and it glues it. And yeah, so you're just taking time and just to get all those things right, and just working at those things in isolation and learning from these elements of mixes where I've went, snare was too pokey, I need to work at that, right? It wasn't clipping, I just wasn't compressing it enough. And the other thing that the Roses mix taught me was I really do need to be less safe in regards to the snare fundamental. Find the snare fundamental. If it's at 120, 160, whatever, boost it. You know what I mean? And then cut the octaves down from that. So if it's at like 160 and then the next octave's at 300 and the other octave's at 600, cut a bit of 300 and 600 and boost your fundamental, and you'd be amazed at how much mud you take out, but you get this really like doof, doof, doof for the snare. Where before what I found is I used to overemphasize on the top end. I used to add like loads of 10K and stuff, when actually when I was listening to more references and I was again tuning my ear back, I was like, there's way, way, way more like low end in snares. And it's actually something that I was almost thinning out my snares because I wanted the top end crack. And it's just things like that, and just calibrating your ears and doing listening. I mean, a lot of these like things I've mentioned there has just been me sitting with the monitors that I've been learning, the headphones and all the speakers, and just listening to people like him that, you know, knows his stuff. He's a drummer. You know, if he wants to know about guitars, he'll come to me. But if it's drums, I'm not ashamed to be like, fucking hell, like I made a really big mistake there. No, I was wrong to say that fucking wasn't right in your drum kit there. I do it quite a lot on this podcast. I knee jerk and go, no, what Ed? No, I'm not feeling it. I'm not firing it. And then 2 days later I go, yeah, you were right. What did you do on that? But, you know, that's the great thing about our relationship, is that, you know, we can go back and forth, and, you know, we've got humility, and it's all about the journey at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's kind of been things that I've been focusing on, is drums, bass. In terms of bass shaper, fucking mwah. One plugin. It's just got everything that I can use to get things right. And I understand how the features work. Same with kick shaper. And yeah, just less is more. If I'm doing guitars, if I'm doing instruments, I'm genuinely just looking for stock Studio One EQ. I used to do like getting a Kirchhoff and stuff. I'm like, no, I just know what I need to do. Maybe it could just be, right, find wherever a problem is in that guitar. Is it too bright? Right, is it 3K? Take it down a bit. Is it like a bit muddy? Right, let's find out where the mud is, take that down, leave it alone, and then just focus on the balance. I mean, you can't see it, but I'm touching my fader port 16 for no reason. But, you know, just balance and automation and level is something that Emma has taught me for years, is that, Polly went, you'd be amazed at how far you can get with just a fader and, you know, a pan pop. You'd be amazed at how far you could get just by getting levels right. So yeah, less is more. That's kind of been my thing. What's been your kind of recent developments, would you say, in the past maybe 6-8 months?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say my work here is complete. You're welcome. What have I been working on? Yeah, so I've as we discussed in the headphone episode recently, I've been starting on headphones, and I've needed to tweak my Harman curve, which is annoying because I need to go in and I've been using the stock Pro Tools and Logic plugins for that, but they've got limited bands and I need one more band. So I'm going to have to go in and use FabFilter, which is fine. I've just got to program it all in again, and I haven't bothered yet, but that's what I've got to do, because mixing with the nanos, every time I went to the speakers, there was a little bit too much at about 125, 150. So I need to put that in to the nanos so I compensate and don't have to adjust later. That's been fun. I'm enjoying the Wes Audio digitally recallable analog stuff. For those of you who are into analog and haven't looked at it yet, it genuinely is great sounding gear, and just pulling up a session or a master and it comes back. Oh, it's a joy. I just see it as the future of audio. I think Wes Audio are going to be massive this year. And they've got something coming out at NAMM this week, or has been out whenever this episode comes out, because we're ahead of schedule, aren't we? So when this comes out, it will be out, and no, I will not be buying it because I made a promise, which I'm keeping.
He is.
Yeah, my process is similar. Paul and I very much merged into the same person.
I know.
It's drums and bass, because Prizzy's quote, I'm not going to get bored of quoting this.
I know, you're right. I know.
The low end is, if you get the low end right, it's the gift that keeps on giving and the problem that keeps on compounding if you get it wrong. Yep. And it's so true. And this mix we've got coming is interesting because there's bass. The drums sound awful, which is a challenge, even for me. It's got a nice bass part, that sounds good. And then there's loads of bass synths, stereo bass synths. So I'm like, ooh, I've kind of been quite creative getting these to sit nicely in the mix. Because otherwise there's a lot going on. I was describing this mix to a friend of mine today, and I said, yeah, it's like someone's let a child into a room full of synthesizers with a box of spanners and rolled the room over a few times.
There's so much percussion as well. It's like even the intro is full percussion, and then they've got a different snare to the main snare that comes in. So you've got to get that short snare to then work with the snare that comes in. And you've got all these plinky plonky things that come in, and they've got breakdowns. Even the bass that Ed's talking about, there's a sine bass. And so what I've been working at is obviously thinking about the headroom and how much that's taken out, because there's one bit where you've got the bass, the synth bass, and the sine bass.
Yeah.
So I've had to clip them all individually, just a dB max, the absolute max dB, just to make sure. And obviously compressing it as well with double tap, which I still use all the time. It's like my bass compressor of choice. And then I go into bass shaper. But it's very difficult when people just layer bass sims, because especially if you've got all of that together, and the more obviously sub energy they have, you're just eating up headroom, and you've really got to watch, because obviously if you're allowing that to hit your limiter, and especially the mastering engineer, he's going to have an issue, because there's only so much that they can do. That's been difficult, but it's good though, because I like these things cropping up, because it teaches us things that we will probably have in another mix down the road for a client. So it's better to get that right now.
Yep. I've been getting into FabFilter Q4. That's going on this mix. That's been fun. I've been using the spectral dynamics section in a couple of places, which I quite enjoy. The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. Don't forget, you can't just upload your songs to Amazon, Spotify, iTunes, or Tidal. You have to go through a music distribution service. There are many out there, but DistroKid is the one that Paul and myself use. They don't take any of your royalties. You keep 100% of the streaming revenue that you earn. For just $1.92 a month or $22.99 a year, you can upload unlimited songs. Your lyrics can be found in Google and other places. You get the blue Spotify verified checkmark, and you can create royalty splits between yourselves and fellow contributors. You also get access to the new DistroKid iPhone app for editing and uploading songs and accessing your statistics on the move. There are plenty of other tools available on DistroKid. We'll go through those in another section. But one thing we've been chatting about off air is I feel like last year we focused on mix translation, and that's been infinitely beneficial.
Yeah, totally.
And I think already us identifying this low end thing is a result of extensive translation. I'm there thinking, well, we're both there clearly thinking, okay, when these bass elements add up, that's going to blow a limiter out, which is going to blow a phone out, and it's not going to work. So we need to control this in the mix. And I feel like our focus this year is going to be more on referencing.
Yeah,
and
totally.
Really getting into genre specifics. Now, I could not think of an artist that was similar to this track we're doing, so I searched some stuff on Tidal and came up with a pop synth playlist, and actually heard some really good sounding tracks, which interestingly, Paul, the snare fundamentals were basically like the entire frequency spectrum. It was like
right.
Everything, and how they were using reverb. So how they've done that is pretty remarkable. So that's going to be a challenge. But yeah, I think our focus is going to be refining our genre awareness.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think that will help us lean more towards what styles we want to do. I mean, I feel like I've got country down. I feel like I could do a good rock mix, a good pop mix. I was schooled in rap and drill again recently. I might have a Christian worship song mix coming. I might have a show band mix coming. Yeah, I've got a few things on the periphery, which brings me to the next thing I've been working on, which is if you follow my social media platforms, you will have seen an increased output of reels and shorts and stuff. I've had a guy working on those, basically turning all my long form content into short form content with a view to it trying to be helpful. It's grown the Instagram, and it's resulted in 1 or 2 enquiries floating around. So it's been useful, but hasn't been the most cost-effective approach, but I wanted to try it. So the next thing I'm trying is full-on audio animal style social media marketing, and I am ignoring my mentor who told me not to do this for reasons I totally respect and understand, and we've had a good long conversation about this. But I just need to start getting people through the door and then experience. And really, I think the thing you and I are missing now, Paul, is we've got the technical skills down. Genre awareness, I think we could refine.
Oh, 100%. There's way more stuff that we could work on, yeah.
Yeah, that will come this year with referencing, but I think it's just experience, taking even this, identifying those 3 basses are going to be a problem. That's come from experience.
Yeah.
If we multiply that over a few years and a couple of 100 mixers, we'll be in a very good place. So it's just about getting people through the door at the moment. So I feel my website's geared towards sales funneling clients. I've got a mailing list that goes out to people. Who knows if it'll be effective, but the social media marketing thing is the one thing I haven't tried. And we know Paul from the Audio Animals. I've got to know him quite well, and from what he tells me, it's working wonders for them. So I don't know why I'm so handsy today. It's a bit.
No, you're doing a Paul third. Jazz hands. So in terms of, say, your kind of workflow, what about your Mixbus? Because that's something that we have changed a lot. I've definitely changed my Mixbus processing a lot since we last did it. How has yours changed? Like, how have you? Because obviously Ed's been doing a lot more mastering and trying his hand at mastering and learning a lot more, which has obviously helped him to then hone his Mixbus. Because obviously, as most mixers work these days, they don't really want the mastering engineer to do anything. They want it essentially to be a transfer. So really, you get the loudness and you get the mix sounding the way you want it with the loudness, which obviously Ed's been having to play about with. So in terms of, say, your Mixbus processing, how has that changed, say, over the past maybe half a year?
If anything, it's got less on it. And it's currently, off the top of my head without looking at it, God Particle doing very little, like at most, I think 60 on the dial, no limiting. Then I will use a little bit of ozone, but I do that right at the end. And if it tells me anything horrific, I go into the mix and fix it. I don't rely on ozone. But so far, recently, it's been, barely telling me to do much. But there's a couple of nice modules that can help add some sparkle to a mix, like Clarity and the dynamic one. The maximizer gets binned immediately.
Yeah, I'm the same.
That's horrific. Controversial, I know. There's Fab Filter doing a little bit of dynamic responsiveness in the low and top end for a bit of life. I quite like that. And then it's going... Sometimes I'm using the Pandora from Wes Audio. Sometimes. But you kind of got to be careful with that because there's almost too many options on that. It's great when you know what you want to do, but you can also paralyze yourself with too much stuff. So rarely any bus compression other than that. And then sometimes I'll use the Better Maker now on the mastering bus, but usually I'm putting that on my drum and bass bus or just the drums.
Makes more sense, yeah.
Doing something with that. I want to try it on vocals. I've been recommended to do that. And then it all ends in MasterPlan version V10.
Yeah, it's crazy. Version 10 though, yeah.
They went from 10 to 1.5, which makes no sense. And I hate the layout on 1.5. So 10 is the way. It keeps wanting me to update and I'm like, no.
But I think, what it shows is that less is more. And, in terms of my Mixbus, there's no Gullfoss anymore. I'm not going daft with ozone anymore. I'm not even using Clarity anymore. Like, my Mixbus is genuinely the end console routing. So it's generally just a master instance of all the end console thing that I use on, every channel, and then do a lot of grouping and summing and stuff like that. And then I have a EQ, and it's just Emrichelik's Mixbus EQ. It's genuinely just a high pass filter at 30, and then it's like I think it's like a 3 or 2 dB boost at 50 hertz, and then a low pass filter at 19k, and then a boost. I think it's maybe like a 2 dB boost at around 8k. And what I found is that low end boost, it just allows me to get the low end where it needs to be, because I always find that when I don't have that, I just subconsciously don't mix as, I don't know, I think I mix a little bit light, just maybe a little bit thinnish, where I think that just that kind of mixing into that just as an overall mix just gives you that bit of, kind of industry, I would say industry kind of low end, that kind of, just that extra bit of like low end spread. And then the 8K just kind of gives you that kind of top end hyped kind of mid-range that just kind of makes everything a little bit more present. It's a little bit of a smiley curve, but it just works. It works really well. And then I'll go into God Particle. I just always have it at 100%, which obviously is 50% because it's a parallel processor. So yeah, it's God Particle just doing its thing. Never use a limiter, never do that. And then it goes into MasterPlan. Yep. I'm using Ozone. I'm just using it for the impact module. I quite like the impact module.
It helps, doesn't it? Like
it does,
2 or 3% on a mix.
Yeah, just like, especially in the low end, it just does something for me.
It's almost cheating.
I know. So I do
Embracing
that.
AI, that's how we'll frame
Yeah,
it.
I know. So I've got impact, and again, it's a subtle thing. It's just doing its thing. And then I always use stabilizer, and I always use that in the way that Nicholas from Panorama Mastering uses it. Because what I found, I tried not to use it, and I found that when I give it to Marcel, our in-house mastering engineer, he'd always come back to me and go, just a little bit of 10K. I had to just do a bit of a dynamic at 10K, where what I find that that the stabilizer plugin normally does is it's normally that 10K area, and it just dynamically takes it out. So I do the thing that Nicholas does, exact same setting, in the pop setting, and it just kind of reduces that 10K dynamically, and it just gets everything. Normally when I do that, Marcel never ever touches that 10K. And then it goes into MasterPlan, and yeah, get it hitting about maybe minus 11 lufs. I don't use any of the EQs. I don't use the thump thing. I used to use the compressor thing in it because I used to do this thing in the low end, but then I was kind of maybe doing a bit much. So I'm just kind of like, basic pitch, just using the loudness knob. So in the loudness knob is genuinely just like clipping and limiting, but it's really, really nice. It's not transparent. It's got a sim to it. But I just find that I can get things, to a minus 11, minus 10, minus 9 if I wanted to. And it sounds punchier, and I don't lose the dynamics and the energy as much as any other fucking limiter that I was using.
MasterPlan, for those who haven't used it, please check it out. It is a wonderful plugin. I use it in mastering as well. And yeah, there's various options. I don't use the compressor in it. There's a multi-band, 3-band compressor in it. It just does weird things to me. But there's a low thing that's got like low end warmth harmonics, I guess. And some mixers putting it on about 10% just makes it nice and thick in the low end. And there's a clarity thing, isn't there, for the low mids? That again at about 10%, I rarely use it. I'll never use it more than that. But just can clear up a few things. Use with caution. And then it's got a really nice widener, which works well, and you could put it to 100% and it doesn't do any of the weird phase stuff that some of the other more famous stereo wideners do. But again, I've probably never used it more than 1.2. Goes from 1 to 2, so from 1.2.
1.5, that's my max. 1.5 is like with
5 widening.
1.5, yeah, 1.5.
Oh, as in 1.15?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, 1.15,
right.
sorry.
So like 15%, basically, yeah.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's like as much as I use
50%.
I know.
Guitars be in the room next door.
I know. But I just find that like having tools that are just really simple but aren't doing that much. But I suppose like the Mixbus EQ is doing, a bit of heavy lifting, but it's all about trying to mix into that and being comfortable to just having the mix done. I always, even just like the 19K low pass filter thing, I always found that Marcel used to always dial back the top end. And when I thought I was doing it enough in Ruby, and I wasn't, in Acoustica Ruby, which was the DW Fern, which I've stopped using.
Here's a concept for you with that, because you're high passing to 30, which as a mastering engineer, I'd argue is quite high. It might be worth, again, this is something we'll probably discuss this year in terms of genre specifics. Like, I think we're hopefully going to have a rap drill track coming up. I wouldn't be high passing to 30 on that, because that's like, kind of want that girth. Within reason, it's got to be mix dependent, I'd say, rather than just, I'll do 30 and 19K. Because 19K is quite low as well. If there is airy stuff in there that you want, 24 at a 24 dB per octave, no one needs anything above that.
But then you got to remember that, let's see, for me, it's like what I learned about the top end is that and it's something that you picked up in Roses, and you were like, there's something that's distracting. And then as soon as I realised that Ruby wasn't taking off as much top end as I thought, and I just went, right, I'm just going back to Emra's EQ. Straight away I was like, oh my God, I can actually hear how distracting that was not having that out. So I always find that something, and as well, most people are lucky if they can hear past 16k anyway.
You feel it though, especially with the 24 dB per octave slope. My point being, my recommendation would be don't use that as a default. Use it if you need it at 19. My default would probably be even nothing, maybe 10 on the low end, because that's just like, blind person infrasonic vibrations, isn't it? Ultrasonic, which one is it? I can't remember.
Yeah.
And then at the top, it's the other one.
Infrasonic,
But have the option so you can bring it down later if you need it. Because, you're very right. In mastering, most of the time, I'm bringing it down to 20. 19, I feel that's low. But 20, because you just don't need noise above.
Yeah, but you've also got to remember, like, realistically, what most instruments are making. Really, you're just wasting headroom for me. I think that's why Emra does it. Because obviously he's got to get stuff loud, and he mixes heavy stuff. He's done a lot of hip hop, a lot of like bass heavy music, and he's always like, Paul, he went, gotta get it loud. He went, the only way you're going to get shit loud is by making sure that you give yourself as much headroom as possible. So, you know what I mean? I think most mastering engineers, if you leave that in, they probably are going to take it out. And I think 30 is low enough, in my personal opinion. I think below 30, but obviously you can say, you've got that high pass filter encroaching, because obviously it's a slope. So obviously it's for anybody that's not watching, I don't know how would we describe this, Ed? Like petting a cat or fucking something.
I don't know, but I'm surprised Riverside hasn't blown any.
Okay, where's my fireworks?
Fireworks or some strange reactions to thumbs.
Yeah, but I think
doesn't work for me. The Working Audio Tools podcast is brought to you in association with our friends at DistroKid for all of your musical distribution needs. For a little bit more, $39.99 a month, you can have 2 artists on your roster, which includes everything just mentioned. Additionally, synced lyrics in Apple Music, further streaming analytics statistics. You can create a customizable record name. Mine, for example, is Ed Thorne Rhythm and Records. And you can customize release dates, pre-order dates, iTunes pricing, and again, much more. Now, if you're an artist manager or a record label, the Ultimate Bundle gives you up to 100 artists for just $89.99 a year. And you get 1 terabyte of instant file sharing, which is useful, but also contact information for thousands of playlist curators on Spotify. This is really useful so you can pitch your artist music to playlist curators around the world. Only available in the Ultimate Bundle from DistroKid. Yeah,
but I think, obviously me and Ed are getting in the weeds again as usual, but I think what is important, and we will stress, is that the less that we do, the better results we get. Actually, I'll give you a little tip, and I was thinking about this when I was walking to the studio, was I didn't realise I was doing this until I went, I actually am doing that. See, before when I used to mix, if there was an issue in a mix, or there was something I was like, I want to change something, the first thing I would say is, I need to add something to that. Well, what I do now is I go, do I need to have that there? I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to look for, does something need to be taken away? Have I added something that I can take away? Am I actually like the problem? Have I created the problem in the mix? And when you find that you do that and you're actually subtracting instead of, adding in regards to your processing, things just get way, way, way more natural. Like there's some, I'm not going to mention names, but there's some people on Instagram that, share like little kind of mix, like screenshots and, little like clips of music that they've been mixing. And there's this one gentleman where, fucking hell, man, he's got like at least 10 fucking plugins on every single fucking track. It looks like it's just, and I hear it and I'm like, I can hear the processing. It's like it sounds like a process sound. And it took me ages to learn what a process sounded like, because my early mixes, they sounded processed 100%. Like I was plugging daft, and I used to have big plug-in chains, and it was only till I started backing off, especially with drums. You think about, especially when you're dealing with phase with drums, like it's very, very, very easy to over-process drums. and then all of a sudden you've got drums that don't sound like a drum kit in a real room. That's something that I've been like fighting it for years, because I don't really still understand, how a drum kit should really sound, because not being a drummer and not really going to loads of live gigs and stuff. But yeah, it's really important that if you have monitoring that, can give you different perspectives and can tell you elements of truth, you'd be amazed at like how much processing you'll do when your monitoring isn't really telling you the truth. Like if you've got shitty monitoring and you're like, this doesn't sound right, and you don't do a lot of referencing, and again the monitoring, just like for example, I got the Sony MDR 7506s, I got them for 50 quid. Andrew Shep's mixed on them. Fuck knows how anybody could think that you could do a full mix on those. They're basically fucking NS10s. They basically have a roll-off that starts off about 10k. There's no top end in them. So I was like, tried Harman to them. I was like, whoa, these sound dull as shit. Because I'd taken off, like, basically the top end is like the 7-8k. That's its top end in there. So by dulling that, it just sounded really dull. Because it didn't have the top end to counterbalance it. And then same with the sub. It was like, the auto EQ was saying, you need like a 12 dB like shelf at 20 hertz. And so I was like, tried it just for shits and giggles. And you could hear a bit of a difference where the shelf was encroaching into some of the low end that the headphone was making. But because the headphone does not really produce subs, you can't fucking hear it. Like, you can't boost what's not there. And, I was sitting there thinking, there are people out there that mix on this, and they'll probably sit there and go, it should sound a certain way. Like, if you were to try and get, a mix to sound like as punchy as an Andananos and, as spacious as, the HEs in your mind's eye, it would translate fucking terribly. And that's why it's really important that we take the time to get monitoring that tells us the truth. That we get an element of translation that we understand. For this, like the Nanos have taught me so much because I understand how they should sound. The Nanos, I've said this to many people, the Nanos should slam. The Nanos should fucking like be aggressive. Like when you get a mix sounding aggressive on the Nanos, the bass will just tell you. Like if the bass sounds correct in Nanos, the bass is right 8 times out of fucking 10. And then in terms of your drums, in terms of the level of the vocal, you've just got to get the mix sounding punchy and vibrant, and it slams. And it's, it's just normally right. And I just think that's been such an important thing is, using your ears. So if something's not sounding right to me, instead of just going, I'll get fucking soothe on it. I used to over-soothe everything, and I've calmed that shit down now. What I'll do now is, instead of going, I'll get a plug-in out and I'll try this analog emulation. People are ruining their mixes with analog emulations because they think that they just add analog to something and it sounds, it makes it 10% better. It's not fixing your problem. Right? See, just like there'll be times I'm like, I'm not sure. If I'm not sure on someone on the Nanos, and especially if I'm in here, Nanos come off, I'll move to the speakers. I'll move to the fucking MX4s. I'll stick on the HEs. You know what I mean? I listen and go, right, it's not that much of an issue. It's maybe just a Nano thing, right? Okay, move on to that. And then when I come back to the Nanos, I know to forget about that. And the way that I found that psychology is really important in mixing, and you can teach yourself to ignore issues. You know what I mean? It's amazing how something could poke out to you, but then see once you go, that's not an issue anymore. Your brain just goes, all right, okay, let's move on to that then. It's crazy, but I think many people don't understand that. They don't take the time to understand the psychology of mixing and the way that the brain perceives things. And that's something that I've learned a lot, and that comes from referencing, and it comes from, again, having multiple reference in regards to monitoring and understanding what they should tell you. You know what I mean?
And you're raising a good point, which is to be doing things with intent.
Yes.
And that's something I'm definitely trying to apply this year. This mix, I have to admit, because there's so many things going on.
You need to make room, man. It's hard.
I felt myself at some point being like, I'm just doing stuff now. Why am I doing? What's the objective? What's the priority?
Yep.
What needs to go where? Forward, back, sides. Given where things come in. But I think one thing I'm really getting out of mastering is understanding perceptions. And the perception of how the perception of a mix can change based on different things. So I've typically, I listen to my last Roses mix now, which I'm going to redo because I think it's a good multi-track, but I'm going to redo the in-the-box mix and then set up an analog version when all the Wes audio finally arrives. If it hasn't by the time this episode comes out. with the idea being that, I want to redo that Roses mix in the box because I was so impressed with what you did, Paul, that I want to challenge myself. But also I've identified that in that it was quite kick snare heavy, and that had the perception of giving it lots of low end weight, but was also causing problems with limiting and headroom. And what I'm learning in mastering is how one element, usually the kick, can cause problems and can give a perceived imbalance.
Yeah.
And it's not a case of adding in more top end, it's just lower the kick like a dB or 2 or 3. And sometimes I'm actually not afraid to put it down more than I would like. I may pendulum and, this next mix, you'll be like, where's the kick? Like, right, well, I've taken it down 3 dB. So, okay, well, that's 1.5, 2 dB too many, but, we'll meet in the middle and it'll be a good mix in the end. But the perception of how something in the mix or in the master can just change the overall balance and just understanding, and then bringing in mid-side processing. Oh my God, that's been a head fuck with mastering because you can overdo it very easily. It's very easy to make things sound different without necessarily making them sound better. But I feel like I've got my head round the mid-side processing. And again, it's perception. It's just, okay, if you take a little bit away on the sides in the low end, does that help or does that hinder the foundation? If you add a bit to the mids to bring the guitars and the width, does that help or hinder the perception? Where's it hitting? I was going around circles with masters being like, right, I've done all this cool stuff. Sounds great. And A-B it to the mix. And it's like, why does the mix sound louder? It's like, what have I done here? Usually caused by the smiley face, which, as you realise with Emra, by lowering those, you do give yourself more headroom. I think, what he says is always right. What Emra says, I mean, and what Paul says, to be fair. He's annoyingly often right. But use those things with caution. But yeah, Emra's EQ curve is pretty spot on for a lot of things. I think, Paul, ultimately, you trying to create mixes that are a transfer. I think that was a great conversation. We were with Ems, weren't we, when we had that?
Yeah.
And he was talking about sending mixes to Joe Laporta and Joe saying it's just a transfer. That is the goal for
100%,
mix
100%.
engineers. And then it's down to the mastering engineer to be disciplined enough to be like, okay, this doesn't need anything doing to it. So your third mix of Roses and the master I did, I was like, cool, this barely needs anything. But I had to be, again, pull on my experience that I've eventually got after a year of mastering to decide, okay, there's a couple of things we can do, but doesn't need much. Less is more, as we've discussed. So I think you have inadvertently become a mastering engineer, Paul. And I think you have the ears for it. So you should probably explore that. I'm doing hands again, but
I know. See,
there's a compliment in there somewhere.
The thing is with me is that I know that I got very deep into rabbit holes. So I know that if I get into mastering, then the mixing side will kind of take a bit of a backseat. Where in my head, I'm just like, right, if I get the mixes to sound right, then I'm almost kind of getting myself there to be a mastering engineer because I'm learning how a mix should sound. You know what I mean? So if I got to a point where I was doing lots of mixes and trying different mastering engineers and they were like, dude, this is basically a transfer. Then I'm like, right, okay, so if I take other people's tracks, I kind of know how it should sound. Obviously, you do references and blah, 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 and that's the benefit of, the studios. I've got so many reference points. Many people are like, no, it's confusing, you're confusing yourself. And I'm like, this is what I find funny about the internet, is that it's the most contradictory fucking place ever. So you'll get people like that'll scream, just use your ears, just use your ears. And that's what I've been saying, in this episode.
I am, across multiple devices.
Yeah. And it's like, just use your ears, just use your ears. And it's like, yeah, no, but again, I'm using my ears, but on getting different perspectives of the mix. Yeah, but just learn monitoring, just learn your monitoring, learn and mix. And I'm like, like you've got to learn the limitations. I'm not going to get too deep into it because this is going to be a video that I'm going to make, not this week but next week, about why the whole, just learn and mix. Like, you can get Sony MDR 5706s, you can learn them, and just learn and mix, buddy, learn and mix. I'm like, right, you got to learn the limitations, and then see when you learn the limitations, how are you going to mix your fucking low end and your subs on them? How are you going to mix your air and your top end? Because mid-range, the magic is in the mid-range. You went, yeah, I know, but people are listening to full-range systems these days. They're listening on fucking AirPods that go fucking all the way down to 20 and fucking 22 or whatever, all the way up to 22 kilohertz. So, yeah, it's times have changed now. It's like, don't get me wrong, I think the Sonys, what I've learned is that I understand why Andrew Sheps would have used them as a reference, because it genuinely is like a bandpass speaker. It's like the tantrums, however, the Sonys being so cheap, the drivers are limited, and there's no fucking transient response in them, where at least you pay a little bit more for like a bandpass speaker like the tantrums. You get like the spatial elements, because either way, right, I'm just like, the MDRs are just, they sound like fucking 80 fucking quid headphones.
We get it. You don't like them.
Yeah, I know. But
controversial video.
I like them for tracking.
Paul's channel.
They've got good isolation. They're comfy, and again, they've got a bandpass thing going on. But I think that for tracking, it might be good because of that area that it kind of peaks. So they're quite kind of a little bit bright in that kind of 5 to 7 or whatever range. So you can pick up sibilance really well. Again, they're a tool. I just don't think for critical mixing, doing this professionally, I think it's bad advice for people just that you could learn it and you could do that professionally. When when we are speaking to people in the industry, they invest a lot in their rooms, a lot in their headphone setups, and a lot in the fucking speakers. Like, there's nobody that I know right currently now. Even Andrew Sheps, he fucking mixed on 60 grand PMCs and is now using these. Like, again, what did he say on the Odyssey website? I have no sonic comments on my mixes anymore. It fucking says it all. But yeah. Tools are tools at the end of the day, but I think, what's very important is, that you, I say teach this thing, it's this thing. It's this thing. I mean, what I've learned is that mixing is really all about listening, and it sounds so fucking stupid to say that, but I think many people don't really get it, and it took me a long time to get right. There is a reason why you have certain types of speakers and different types of monitoring, and why you will take breaks every 15 minutes, and why you will reference, and why you will search, maybe half an hour for certain references for a certain track that you're mixing. There's a reason why, that you'll calibrate your headphones. There's a certain reason that you'll take the time to get the room right. And, all of these things is all about, getting yourself in a position where you can hear better. Because what you'll find is that when you can hear better, and you can hear better in regards to different perspectives of the mix, your decision making allows you to do less. And as we've said, less is more. And that genuinely, I think, is the thing that nobody talks about. That there is the reason why when you go and mix with the masters and they're like, fucking, they say it's all like, yeah, just use this plugin, just a little bit of this compressor, yeah, like 2-3 plugins on it. It didn't really do much. And everybody's like, no, they got to be doing X, Y, and Z. They got to be doing this, that, and this trick. And I'm like, no, it's just because they've got a good pair of fucking monitors that they've learned to trust. It's like, you do have to learn your monitoring, but I think the most important thing is learning the limitations. And that's what I think me and you have learned, is the limitations, not only in our room, our monitoring, but also ourselves. You learn about the limitations that you have. My limitations were I favoured, top end and mid-range quite a lot. I wasn't really focusing as much on the low end. I wasn't letting the kick take up a lot more low end. When I started mixing, it used to be bass is where your bass comes from, and the kick is where the thump comes from. But what you realise is that in so many times, the thump of the kick is way lower than what you think, and something has to win. And in most cases, the kick is going to win. But again, there's going to be a time where you have to let the bass win. And it took me a long time to accept that, oh my God, I'm going to have to high pass this bass to 80 hertz sometimes. Because when I first started out, it was like, no, you don't do that. You don't do that. But yeah, sometimes that's what it needs, because the kick has got to occupy that low end, and you've got to think about headroom and all the stuff that we spoke about. And the only way that you craft that, and the only way that you learn that, is by making mistakes, and by, learning from your mistakes, and by, having people in the industry, people that do this for a living. It's not just your Touras and your Emras and your MSMs. We are blessed to have, lots of working engineers. Again, Tyrone is a really humble guy, but he like is working in a genre that me and him have, well, he's tackled it more than I have. I think I've tackled it once. I know that's something I need to do. I need to get into that underground scene. I need to get into that way of, trying to do a mix where it's not a rock mix anymore. Drums need to sound a certain way, snare needs to sound a certain way, hi-hat's very important, needs to sound a certain way, the diction of the vocal has to be a certain way, the low end has to be a certain way, and it's, I think as Ed said, it's all about these genres, and that's the journey that me and him are in just now, is that many people say, you kind of mix the same things. Well, yeah, because we like to mix what we like, but at the end of the day, we do need to push ourselves out of our comfort zone.
Yeah, there'll be a bit more of that coming this year.
And there you have it, yeah. I'd say that's for me. I think that's a good little update on what we've learned and kind of processes and stuff like that. So, yeah, we'll do this in another 6 to 8 months or whatever, and we'll probably, hopefully we've not learned that much. I'd like to say this at this point, that in 6 to 8 months we'll come back and be like, yeah, just kind of learn, just take from what we spoke about last time and, yeah, kept going with it.
Yeah, I know from studying an instrument for, be basically 30 years now. Yeah, it doesn't stop.
Yeah. And it's just the amount that you learn, like you still learn.
Oh my God, yeah, it's hugely diminishing returns, which is a good position to be in. And then largely, most of those returns are just experience-based.
Yep.
And stylistic awareness development. And I think that's that will be our job. I think that'll be a common theme this year, because I remember learning, you start playing rock beat number 1, doom, jat, doom, and then you move to like a shuffle, doom, gat, and then you move to some jazz, ting, ting, and then, as you study each genre, you realise that, like I've basically been a professional rock player. I studied jazz. It is like a language. You have to speak it, you have to listen to it, you have to play it every day to keep that fluid vocabulary. It'd be the same with mixing. If you mix jazz, you got to mix it regularly to keep that fluid vocabulary. But what you learn from one genre, you can apply to all the others.
Yes, a great point.
Tastefully. Great point. I'd like to round off by saying that also, above all this, the most valuable thing of this podcast for Paul and I is that we talk about all this stuff. You guys get like a 1 hour snippet a week, right? We are fortunate enough and cursed enough and blessed enough to talk about this every day, pretty much, of the week. Even if it's something silly or something minor or something major, or even if we butt heads, we know that ultimately we're trying to get each other to improve. And basically it's like an accountability friendship. I mean, we chat about other stuff as well. It's not just all audio, like we are friends, but... we're accountability buddies and mixing mentors for each other. And I can say there's no way I'd be where I am now mixing if I hadn't done this podcast with Paul. So.
No, I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
Paul.
I think, look, at the end of the day, that's what this is. We say it all the time. It's a journey. And hopefully that you are, taking snippets of what we do and you apply it sometimes, to what you're doing. And if we can help you along the way, then that's what it's all about. So, yeah, that's me, that's you, and we will see you whenever we see you, which will... Actually, no, that's terrible. We will see you on Saturdays, because he's not autistic, but I am, and we have to do this every Monday night, and it has to go out every Saturday. So, no, you will see us next Saturday. I don't know what... Maybe we'll get the mix done. Do you think we'll have the mix done for next week?
Yes.
I'm like 80% there now. I just need to listen to it on different monitoring systems and work on the panning and getting some element and depth. I'm trying to make it work depth wise, just so things can take priority and I could kind of fill it out a bit. But yeah, we might have it done. We might not done. Ed might just be like, "Fuck this! I'm done with it. Can we move on?"
Oh no, I'm stubborn, and it's a challenge. And there will be a pearl of wisdom for us to get out of this mix. I can feel it. I don't know what it is yet because it's just a bit of a clusterfuck at the moment. But there will be something everyone can learn from it.
Yeah. So
it's been emotional.
Yep. On that bombshell, we'll see you next week.